Families don't collapse overnight. They fracture quietly, layer by layer, until one day the truth touches the surface and everything beneath it caves in. For us, that truth arrived in the form of an envelope. The afternoon it came was unremarkable. No storms outside, no sense of anticipation, no reason to believe our lives were about to change. My mother was in the kitchen, moving slowly the way people do when routine has numbed them into comfort. My father sat near the window, glasses perched low on his nose, flipping through a newspaper he barely read. I was at the table, half lost in my phone, killing time. The doorbell rang once. I remember thinking it was strange. Nobody visited unannounced anymore. When I opened the door, there was no one standing there, only a small brown envelope resting on the mat. It was plain, slightly worn, with no company logo and no return address. That should have stopped me, but danger rarely announces itself. Inside, my mother glanced at the envelope and shrugged. "Did you order something?" I shook my head. My father did the same. We opened it together at the dining table, the same table where birthdays had been celebrated, arguments resolved, and decades of family history had quietly passed by. There was no letter inside, no explanation, no handwriting, no name. Only a single photograph slid out and landed face up. At first, no one reacted. It was old. The edges were cracked, the colors faded into soft browns and yellows. A man stood in the center, his arm wrapped around a woman. 2 children stood in front of them, smiling awkwardly. A family portrait. Ordinary. Normal. Until my mother froze. Her fingers tightened around the table. Her lips parted, but no words came out at first. "That looks like," she whispered. She didn't finish. I leaned closer, my chest tightening. The man in the photograph had my grandfather's face. Not similar, not close, identical. The same tired eyes, the same jawline, the same familiar half-smile I had seen in old frames around our house. But my grandfather had been dead for 12 years. We buried him, we mourned him, we built our family around the memory of who we believed he was. My mother swallowed hard. "That is your grandfather." The room went silent. No denial could survive what was in front of us. The children in the photo carried his features too. You don't mistake that kind of resemblance. Then my mother noticed the background, the house. Her eyes narrowed. She knows that place. She stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "That house, it's on Cedar Street." My stomach dropped. Cedar Street was 3 blocks from where we grew up. 3 blocks. Not another town, not another state, not another life far away. 3 blocks. That night, none of us slept. The photograph sat under the dim kitchen light like an accusation. Who was the woman? Who were those children? Did they know about us? And then the question that haunted us most: why now? The answer was terrifyingly clear. My grandmother. She had died 6 months earlier, quietly, peacefully, without ever speaking of another family. She had lived with this truth for decades, and only after death had she chosen to reveal it, not to explain herself, but to expose him, and whatever came next would destroy everything we thought we knew. My grandmother didn't confess when she was alive. She waited until she was dead. The envelope arrived without a name, without a warning, without mercy. Inside was a single photograph that dismantled our family in seconds. My grandfather stood in the center of the image, alive and smiling. His arm rested around a woman who was not my grandmother. 2 children stood in front of them, children who shared his eyes, his face, his blood. The house behind them was unmistakable. Cedar Street, 3 blocks from our home. While we believed he worked late, he walked a few minutes away and became someone else. Another husband, another father, another life. My mother recognized the street instantly, her face drained of color. She knew, she said quietly. And that was the moment everything shifted. My grandmother hadn't been blind. She hadn't been naive. She had known and chosen silence. She raised her children, cooked his meals, shared his bed, while another family waited nearby. She stayed quiet not because she was weak, but because she was waiting for the moment when the truth could no longer be controlled, denied, or buried again. That photograph wasn't sent for closure. It was sent to destroy the lie, because some secrets are too heavy to die quietly, and once exposed, they rewrite who you are forever. Some truths don't announce themselves loudly. They wait behind doors. And once you knock, there's no way to pretend you never heard what answers back. The night after the photograph arrived, our house felt unfamiliar. The walls were the same. The furniture hadn't moved. The old clock in the hallways still ticked with the same steady rhythm. But something invisible had shifted, like the air after an argument that never quite ends. My mother sat at the dining table long after everyone else had gone quiet. The photograph lay in front of her, untouched now, as if even looking at it required more strength than she had left. She didn't cry. That scared me more than tears would have. My grandmother had always been the emotional one. My mother, on the other hand, had inherited her father's stillness, the ability to lock things away, to function even when something inside was breaking. That night, she finally spoke. "We're going there," she said. My father looked up from the couch. "Going where?" "Cedar Street." The word landed heavily between them. My father hesitated. "What if this is a mistake?" "It's not," she replied without raising her voice. "You don't send a photograph like this by accident." He rubbed his face slowly. "And if they don't know about us?" My mother's eyes hardened. "Then they deserve to." I stayed silent, but my chest felt tight. Part of me wanted answers. Another part wanted to rewind time, to return the photograph to wherever it came from and pretend it never existed. But some truths don't allow that. The next morning, we stood on Cedar Street. The house from the photograph stood near the corner, exactly where my mother had said it would be. It looked ordinary, too ordinary. Fresh paint, a small porch, wind chimes hanging near the door. A place where birthdays were probably celebrated, where arguments happened, where bedtime stories were told. A place where my grandfather had lived another life. My mother stopped at the sidewalk. She stared at the house for a long time. "I used to walk past here," she said quietly. "I never noticed it." That sentence carried decades of weight. We walked up the path together. My heart pounded harder with every step. This wasn't just confrontation, it was an invasion of their life, of our illusion. My mother raised her hand, then hesitated. In that pause, I understood something crucial. She wasn't just about to confront strangers. She was about to confront her father again, knowing now that she had never truly known him. She knocked. The sound echoed louder than it should have. Footsteps followed, slow, careful. The door opened a crack. A woman stood there, late 50s, maybe early 60s, gray threaded through dark hair pulled back neatly, her eyes sharp but tired, as if life had asked more from her than she ever expected to give. "Yes?" she asked. My mother swallowed. "I'm sorry, this is going to sound strange, but did you know a man named Robert?" The woman's face changed instantly. Not confusion, recognition. The door opened wider. "Who are you?" she asked. "My name is Ellen. Robert was my father." The woman stared at her. For a moment, no one breathed. Then the woman stepped back. "You'd better come in." Inside, the house smelled of coffee and old books. Family photos lined the walls, different faces, different memories, but there he was again, my grandfather, in frames we had never seen, happier, younger, alive. The woman followed my gaze. "You know who he was here," she said. It wasn't a question. My mother nodded slowly. I thought I did. They sat at the dining table, the same kind of table, the kind families always seem to gather around when their lives are about to fracture. Margaret introduced herself and said she was Margaret. "My children are out," she said quietly. "That's probably for the best." My mother reached into her bag and placed the photograph on the table. Margaret didn't flinch. She didn't look surprised. She didn't ask where it came from. Instead, she closed her eyes. "So she finally did it," she whispered. My mother's voice shook. "You knew about us?" Margaret laughed softly. There was no humor in it. "I knew everything." The words hit like a physical blow. "You knew he had another family?" I asked, unable to stay silent. She looked at me. "He didn't call it another family. He called it a complication." Anger surged through me, sharp and sudden. My mother leaned forward. "Did you know about my mother?" Margaret nodded. "She came to see me once." The room went still. My mother's breath caught. "When?" "Years ago," Margaret said, "before your father died." My mother looked stunned. "She never said anything." "She didn't want to," Margaret replied. "She wanted to see me, to see if I was real." Silence fell between them. "Did she hate you?" my mother asked. Margaret shook her head slowly. "No, she pitied me." That hurt more than hatred ever could. Margaret stood and retrieved something from a drawer. A letter. "I think this belongs to you now," she said, sliding it across the table. My mother stared at the envelope, my grandmother's handwriting. Her hands trembled as she opened it. She read silently. Her face changed with each line. When she finally looked up, tears filled her eyes. "She knew everything," my mother whispered. Margaret nodded. "She always did." I felt sick. My grandmother hadn't been ignorant. She had been deliberate. She had stayed silent not because she was weak, but because she was choosing how the truth would survive her. Margaret spoke again, her voice low. "Do you know why she waited until she died?" My mother shook her head. Margaret exhaled slowly. "Because if she had exposed him while he was alive, he would have destroyed the truth again." Those words settled deep. My grandmother hadn't wanted confrontation. She wanted permanence, a truth that could no longer be reshaped, denied, or buried by the man who lived two lives. The letter ended with one line that echoed in my head long after I finished. "When I am gone, the truth will finally be safe." That's when I realized a chilling thing. The photograph wasn't meant for revenge. It was meant to complete something my grandmother never could in life. And this meeting on Cedar Street, it was only the beginning, because the children hadn't been told yet. The photograph was only the opening act. What followed was the quiet, heavy unraveling of a lifetime of lies, layer by layer, and with a precision only decades of deception could produce. We approached the house on Cedar Street under a pale morning sun, the sky muted and gray, as if the weather itself understood the gravity of what we were about to do. The envelope in my mother's hands seemed to vibrate with tension, as though it carried a heartbeat of its own. Every step toward the porch amplified the silence around us. When my mother knocked on the door, it felt ceremonial, like we were opening a gate into someone else's world, a world that existed parallel to ours for decades. The sound of the knock seemed to hang in the air far longer than it should. And then footsteps approached, measured, careful, deliberate. The door opened. Margaret stood there, her eyes sharp, skeptical, and tired. She wasn't startled to see us, and there was a calmness in her stance that felt almost cold, a guard. someone who had built walls around herself to survive the man at the center of our lives. "You're early," she said. Not hostile, but not welcoming either. "My name is Ellen," my mother began. "Robert was my father. I believe you knew him." Margaret's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Recognition, yes, but also a flicker of caution, like she had anticipated this moment but had no intention of letting it be easy. She stepped back, allowing us inside, her movements deliberate, controlled. Inside, the house smelled of old wood and coffee, the scent of lives lived in quiet determination. Family photographs lined the walls, pictures of a man we knew, framed in ways we had never seen, smiling at school plays, holding children in summer gardens, standing by a fishing lake, smiling at a woman we had never met. My grandfather was alive in these images, alive in a way that contradicted every story we had believed. Margaret motioned toward the kitchen table. "We should sit," she said. The invitation was formal, cautious, calculated. We obeyed, sitting on chairs that felt too small for the tension in the room. Margaret sat across from us and looked at the photograph my mother placed on the table. She didn't flinch, didn't gasp, didn't even ask where it came from. Instead, she leaned back, hands folded, and said in a low voice, "She finally sent it." My mother's fingers tightened around the photograph. "You mean my grandmother?" Margaret nodded. "She came here once, before she died. Didn't leave a word, just watched." A silence fell, thick and suffocating. Not just silence between us, but the kind that presses down on your chest, heavy with the knowledge that everything you think you know is about to be rewritten. "You knew?" I asked, unable to stay quiet. Margaret's gaze met mine. "I didn't need to be told." "What do you mean?" I asked, voice tight. I knew the life he was leading, the other children, the other woman, everything, and I accepted it, because survival is not about confrontation, it's about endurance. Her words cut deeper than I expected. My mother's voice trembled, barely audible. "Did she ever try to stop him?" Margaret shook her head slowly. "She tried in her own way, quietly, subtly. She watched, she waited, and then she made a choice." "A choice?" My mother's voice rose. "A choice to let him live a double life? While her own children lived believing in a lie?" Margaret's eyes hardened. "You think it was easy? You think she enjoyed this? She did what she thought was necessary to protect you. Sometimes protection is silence." Her words rang hollow. Protection or strategy? The line between the two blurred in the cold light of Cedar Street. Then she reached for the drawer, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out a letter. A thick, folded piece of paper with my grandmother's unmistakable handwriting. The edges were worn, clearly read before. The kind of letter you keep not to throw away, but because it is too powerful, too dangerous to destroy. "This is hers," she said. "It was meant for you, or maybe for the world. I don't know which." My mother took the letter, trembling, and opened it. My eyes followed every movement, every flicker of expression. The letter read, "If you are reading this, I am gone. If you are reading this, the truth has survived me. Robert lived 2 lives, one with me, one elsewhere. You may hate me for what I did. You may curse my name, but understand, I did not act out of weakness. I acted because the truth, if revealed too soon, would have destroyed everyone I loved. He promised. He lied. You will know the rest soon. Do not seek vengeance, only seek clarity." My mother's eyes filled with tears. Not just grief, but a deep, gnawing understanding. Her hand shook as she lowered the paper. Margaret spoke again, her tone sharp now. "She knew he would never leave me, that he would never choose me or her completely. She also knew you would never understand until you saw for yourself." "And you?" I asked, the question escaping my lips before I could stop it. "Did you ever expect him to leave you?" Margaret's lips tightened. "I expected nothing. I survived. That was enough." A cold silence followed. I tried to process what I was seeing, what I was feeling. Anger, betrayal, confusion, admiration, all wrapped together in one suffocating knot. Then Margaret leaned forward, dropping her voice. "There are things your grandmother couldn't say, things she buried deep in silence. If you think this photograph was the end, it was only the beginning." My mother's hands tightened around the letter. "What do you mean?" "There are children you don't know, friends, memories, documents, places he went that never intersected with your life, until now. You think the letter explains everything? It doesn't. It only opens the door." I swallowed hard. The room suddenly felt smaller, claustrophobic, like walls were closing in, pressing us into the weight of decades of lies.
Margaret continued. Your grandmother did what she could. She waited for her death because she understood the consequences. But she also wanted justice. Not legal, not revenge, but recognition. Recognition that the life she built with him was real. That her endurance mattered. That you mattered. My mother looked at me, eyes wide. She wanted us to see this? Margaret nodded. And now you do. The moment stretched. Every heartbeat, every thought, felt magnified. I realized then that our family, the life we thought was ours alone, had always been part of a larger, darker story. A story written in secret rooms, hidden letters, and quiet endurance. And the children? My mother finally asked. Do they know about us? Margaret's expression tightened. Not all of them. Some never will. Some already do. And some will learn eventually, on their own. My stomach sank. The weight of what this meant, for the family we didn't know we had, was suffocating. Then she spoke the words I will never forget. The photograph was never about revelation. It was about preparation. Your grandmother prepared you for what would come next, and what comes next will define your family in ways you cannot imagine. I wanted to ask more, wanted to scream, cry, demand, but I couldn't. I just sat there, feeling the gravity of decades of silence, of two families built in parallel, of love and betrayal intertwined in ways I could barely comprehend. Margaret's final words lingered as we left the house. Be careful. The truth has many layers, and not all of them are safe. Outside, the sun had risen higher. The street looked ordinary, normal. A gentle breeze moved through the trees. But everything had changed. The photograph, the letter, the meeting, all of it had shattered what I believed about family, loyalty, and love. And yet, the truth was still only beginning to unfold. Because somewhere, in that house, in the lives we had never known, the next revelation was waiting, and we would have to face it, whether we were ready or not.
The morning after our visit to Cedar Street, the photograph and grandmother's letter still weighed heavily on our minds. The envelope had been carefully placed on the dining table, but no arrangement could hold back the tidal wave of questions that demanded answers. The world, once familiar, had fractured overnight, and the fissures ran deeper than any of us could imagine. We had seen the house, met Margaret, understood that our grandfather had lived a parallel life, but the children, the innocent ones, were still unknown. Who were they? How old? Did they think he had abandoned them? Or worse, did they even know about us? The drive to Cedar Street felt different this time. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was necessity. Every stoplight, every turn felt like a countdown. My mother was silent, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. I could see the tension etched in every line of her face, the weight of a family history rewritten in a single photograph. When we arrived, the house looked unchanged, serene in its morning calm, almost deceptive in its normalcy. But we knew better. We knew that behind those walls, the secrets of decades had been kept. Margaret answered the door before we could knock. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something, anticipation perhaps, or the weary acceptance of what was to come. "You're back," she said simply. We didn't need to explain. Words seemed inadequate. She led us into the living room. Photographs lined the walls, a chronological gallery of moments we could never touch. My grandfather smiled in every image, happy, present. And there were the children, his children, alive and well in moments we had never been part of. "You want to see them," Margaret said quietly. I assumed as much. But understand this, they are not your enemies. They know nothing of you. My mother nodded, her jaw tight. We don't want to hurt them. We just need to understand. Margaret led us to the backyard where two children were playing quietly. They were around the ages we had imagined, unaware of our presence. I froze. The resemblance was undeniable. The eyes, the jawline, the same small curl of hair. It was surreal. Here they were, the other half of our grandfather's life. Margaret spoke softly, almost to herself. "Your grandmother wanted you to meet them eventually. She trusted you would approach this carefully, but she also knew some truths can't be avoided." We watched silently, Feeling the enormity of what was unfolding, the children were innocent, untainted by deception. It was clear that our grandfather had kept them separate from us, not out of malice, but perhaps out of fear of discovery, fear of consequences. My mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Do you think he loved them?" Margaret's eyes darkened. He did, and he did not. Love is complicated. He loved in halves, in pieces. He was a man torn between two worlds, two families, and he believed he could maintain balance. But balance is an illusion. We stayed there for hours, silently observing, trying to memorize faces, expressions, moments we had never been allowed to see. And as the day wore on, we understood that the photograph was only a portal, a key to a door we had never known existed. The afternoon brought confrontation. Margaret, my mother, and I sat down to discuss everything, layer by layer. She revealed the routines, the hidden letters, the secret visits, and the way my grandmother had silently protected us from knowledge that might have shattered our childhoods. The magnitude of deception was breathtaking. They were always meant to meet, but timing matters. Your grandmother orchestrated it all. She ensured the truth arrived when it could be seen not as betrayal, but as revelation. And now you must decide what comes next. My mother nodded, absorbing the complexity of decades of secrecy. I felt a mix of awe, anger, and understanding. The children were alive, safe, innocent, and yet their existence posed questions that could not be answered in a single afternoon. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard. I realized then that we were standing at the edge of a vast chasm, a divide that could redefine what family truly meant. We had glimpsed the other side, but crossing it required courage, patience, and understanding. Margaret's final words echoed in my mind as we left. They are part of your family, just as you are part of theirs, but some bridges must be built carefully, one stone at a time. And with that, we drove home, the weight of new knowledge pressing on us like a living thing, knowing that the story was far from over. The photograph had set everything into motion, but now the real confrontation was unavoidable. The morning air on Cedar Street was crisp, but it carried tension like electricity before a storm. Our family's presence here was unprecedented, intrusive, but necessary. Door with a controlled expression, her eyes alert, sharp, like a hawk sensing movement. She knew the gravity of what would happen today. "You're early," she said, voice neutral but firm. We entered without hesitation. Words seemed inadequate. She led us into the living room where photographs adorned every wall, moments we had never seen, events frozen in time, showing a version of my grandfather alive and present in a life we never knew. Margaret gestured toward the backyard. "They are out there, but understand, they don't know you exist, and that ignorance must be preserved until we can approach it carefully." I followed her gaze. 2 children played quietly, unaware of the intrusion. My mother and I exchanged glances. The resemblance was undeniable. The eyes, the expressions, subtle gestures inherited without question. They were the living testament of our grandfather's hidden existence. "They are innocent," my mother whispered. "They know nothing of us or him." Margaret's tone sharpened. "And that is how it should remain until we decide otherwise. They must not be harmed by truths they cannot yet comprehend." Hours passed as we observed silently, absorbing each detail, each nuance of their lives. The photograph had only hinted at this reality. Now we understood the magnitude of what had been hidden from us. A family alive, thriving, yet kept apart. Margaret explained the routine, the careful orchestration by both my grandmother and herself to protect both families from the full weight of truth. Every letter, every secret meeting, every avoidance had been intentional. "She loved you," Margaret said, "in the way she could. She protected you from knowledge that would have destroyed your childhood, but she also prepared for this moment, carefully, deliberately. She trusted you to meet this carefully, to bridge the world she left behind. We were overwhelmed, anger and awe intertwined. The children's innocence, our grandmother's strategy, our grandfather's duplicity. It was almost too much to comprehend." "Did he love them?" my mother asked, voice trembling. Margaret's eyes darkened.
He loved in pieces. He loved selectively. He loved enough to care, but not enough to choose. Balance is an illusion when hearts are divided, and he lived in a permanent state of division. The gravity of decades of silence pressed on us. Margaret's final counsel was a somber reminder. Bridges must be built carefully. Respect must guide actions, and the children's lives could not be disrupted recklessly. As we drove home, shadows lengthened across Cedar Street. We understood that the children were our family, yet not yet fully ours, and our understanding of grandfather, grandmother, and legacy had changed forever. Some truths are too powerful to remain hidden. Some bridges, once crossed, cannot be rebuilt, and we were standing on the threshold of both.
The air was heavy with expectation as we returned to Cedar Street. This time, we were not just observers, we were participants in a reality that had been hidden from us for decades. The children we had glimpsed before were no longer background details. They were central characters in a story that had always belonged to us and yet had never included us. Margaret met us at the door again, her eyes narrowing slightly. She didn't speak immediately, allowing the weight of our presence to settle between us. "Today is different," she said finally. "They are ready to meet you, but not in the way you expect. Patience and respect. That is what this moment demands." We nodded silently, aware that no amount of preparation could soften the impact of what we were about to do. The living room, once serene, now felt charged with tension. Photographs lined the walls, faces frozen in moments we had not been a part of, and there, framed above the mantel, was my grandfather's smile, one that had belonged to a life we had only begun to uncover. Margaret led us to the backyard. The children were playing, unaware of our approach. The younger one, a boy of perhaps 10, kicked a small ball carelessly, while the older girl, maybe 12, skipped rope with meticulous precision. Both were unaware of the adults approaching, unaware that their father had lived another life just blocks away. My mother stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly. We just want to talk," she said softly. "No one is here to hurt you." The boy stopped kicking the ball and turned his gaze toward us. There was recognition in his eyes, subtle yet undeniable. "Your family?" he asked cautiously, voice small but steady. The older girl eyed us critically, her brow furrowed in a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. "Which family?" she asked. We have a dad, and we know who he was. But who are you?" My mother swallowed, trying to maintain composure. "I am your sister," she said, her voice quivering slightly. "We're your family too. We just didn't know until now." The girl took a step back, clearly processing the concept. "Sister? How? Why?" I stepped forward, hoping to bridge the gap. "Because of who he was," I said, nodding toward the house. "Our grandfather, he had a life we never knew about. But now that you know, we want to connect, to be part of your life too." Margaret's eyes were sharp, assessing our every word. "Remember," she whispered, "trust is fragile. One wrong move and this bridge collapses." The boy, after a long pause, seemed to consider my words. "Dad, he never told us about you either," he said quietly. "We didn't know." The girl's eyes softened slightly, though wariness remained. "We liked him, we still do, but we don't know you. How can we trust you?" My mother's voice became firmer. "Because we are here, because your father's choices affected all of us, and we want to make it right. We want to understand him, and you. That's all." For several minutes, silence stretched. The children's initial shock had not faded, but curiosity began to surface. Slowly, cautiously, the girl nodded. "Maybe we can talk," she said. The boy added, "Yeah, but slowly, one step at a time." Margaret finally intervened, her voice calm but authoritative. "Good. That is how it must be done. One step at a time. Let them lead and you follow. Nothing forced, nothing rushed." We spent the next hours walking through the backyard and house, sharing memories, asking gentle questions, and listening. We talked about their father, our grandfather, from their perspective. Their small anecdotes, innocent observations, and partial understanding painted a picture we had never seen. It was surreal. We had grown up believing in a monolithic version of family, and now we were confronted with a multifaceted reality. My grandfather was not just the man we remembered, he was fragmented, existing in two spheres simultaneously. My mother, ever the mediator, guided the conversation carefully. She revealed what she could about his life with us, his affections, his routines, and the love he had tried to show. The children responded cautiously, comparing the stories with what they knew. It was an intricate dance of trust, revelation, and emotional navigation. As evening approached, Margaret intervened again. It is enough for today. Processing comes slowly. Emotions need time. Tomorrow is another day, another opportunity to understand each other. We left Cedar Street with heavy hearts, but a sense of cautious optimism. The first confrontation had not ended in catastrophe. It had not healed the wounds of decades, but it had opened a door that could never be closed again. The day began tense. Each step toward Cedar Street amplified by the knowledge that lives would collide in a way neither side could fully anticipate. The envelope, the photograph, and the letter had set the stage. Now, the real drama was unavoidable. Margaret met us at the door, her eyes sharp, calculating. She didn't need words. The moment we entered, the weight of decades of deception pressed against our chests. "They are prepared," she said, "but tread carefully. Innocence is fragile, and anger is latent. Missteps here are dangerous." The living room was quiet, photographs lining the walls in silent accusation. Every frame told a story, every smile a contradiction to the narrative we had built in our minds. We were intruders in a life that had grown fully without us. Margaret guided us to the backyard where the children played. They were oblivious to the approaching storm. A boy kicked a ball and a girl skipped rope, neither aware that their father's other family had arrived. The tension was palpable, a thin thread stretched taut between curiosity and fear. My mother spoke first, voice trembling but steady. "We are family. We want to talk. No one here wants to hurt you." The boy stopped abruptly, eyes wide. "Family? But, Dad, you never told us about anyone else." The girl's gaze was sharp, skeptical. "Which family?" she asked. "I don't understand. We have him. He was ours. Who are you?" My mother inhaled deeply. "I am your sister. We are your family too. We didn't know until recently. But now that we do, we want to meet you, to understand you, to connect." The girl took a cautious step back. "Connect? How? Why? You are strangers." I stepped forward, trying to bridge the invisible gap. "Not strangers. Family. He lived 2 lives, and now we are here. That's all." Margaret's voice, low and firm, reminded us. "Trust is fragile. Misstep and this bridge collapses." Minutes passed in silence. The boy finally spoke. "Dad never said anything about you. We didn't know." The girl's expression softened slightly. "I don't know if I can trust you. We loved him. We still do. But you, I don't know." My mother's tone hardened, firm but gentle. "We understand. We will not force anything. We just want to learn about him and you. Step by step, nothing more, nothing less." We spent the rest of the afternoon cautiously sharing memories. The children recounted what they knew of our grandfather, and we offered glimpses of him as we had known him. Margaret mediated, ensuring that the exchange was measured, careful, and honest. It was a fragile balance. Emotions ran high. Confusion, grief, curiosity, and the faint glimmer of trust intertwined. My grandfather's fragmented life became tangible in this delicate encounter. His love divided, his choices flawed, his legacy complicated. Margaret's voice eventually brought closure to the session. "It is enough for today. Emotions must settle. Trust must grow slowly. There will be time to understand each other further." We left with a mixture of relief and dread. The first confrontation had not resolved everything.
It had not healed the decades of deception, but it had begun the process of integrating two lives that had run parallel for too long. As we drove away, the sun dipped behind the trees, casting long shadows across Cedar Street. The children were our family. The bridge had been crossed, but we were only at the first step of a journey that would redefine what it meant to belong.
The house on Cedar Street was silent that morning, the air heavy with anticipation. Today, we were not just meeting strangers or half-secrets. Today, we were confronting the shadow of a man who had shaped our lives in ways we were only beginning to understand. My grandfather. Margaret met us at the door, her expression unreadable. She did not smile, did not hesitate. "Are you ready?" she asked. Her tone carried the weight of decades. My mother swallowed, her hands gripping the car door as if bracing herself against invisible blows. "We have to know everything," she said, voice low but determined. "No more half-truths, no more shadows." We entered the house. The photographs lining the wall seemed to stare at us, accusing us silently, showing moments we were never allowed to see. Birthdays, graduations, holidays, events we had missed, lives we had been excluded from. Margaret guided us to the living room. "Today, you will see the full truth," she said. "The parts that were hidden, the letters, the journals, the secrets he carried, all of it. Brace yourselves." She handed my mother a thick leather-bound journal worn with age, its edges frayed. "This belonged to him, your grandfather. Every secret, every thought, every confession is in here. Read carefully, understand, and remember, truth is heavy." My mother opened the journal slowly, flipping the pages. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. Entries dated decades back revealed a man torn between two families, a man who loved but could not choose, a man whose choices had ripple effects beyond imagination. January 12, 1978. Today, I feel the weight of deception. I love Ellen's children, yet my first family deserves everything. How can I divide a life so sharply? Each day, I feel the fracture deepen. March 3, 1980. Margaret asks if I will leave her. I promise, yet I know I will never fully abandon either. The world is cruel and love is incomplete. I must survive and they must survive, even if truth suffers. As my mother read aloud, the children's eyes widened. They had known of their father's presence, but not of the deliberation, the planning, the cold calculation behind every action. The journal revealed not only love, but also fear, manipulation, and the awareness of betrayal. Margaret spoke quietly. He knew he could never be whole, so he split himself, 2 families, 2 lives, and he thought he could balance them, but balance is an illusion. We spent hours in the living room, reading and discussing entries. Each passage peeled back layers of deception. My grandfather had been strategic, controlling, and simultaneously vulnerable. He had loved both families, but in different ways, and his inability to reconcile those feelings had shaped decades of secrecy. November 18, 1985. I fear the day both families discover each other. I fear the chaos, the anger, the heartbreak. But I am bound to secrecy. My life is divided. My legacy will be fragmented. We realized that the photograph, the letters, and Margaret's guidance were all part of a careful orchestration. My grandmother had anticipated that one day these truths would collide, and that day had finally arrived. As the afternoon sun fell, Margaret added another layer. There are documents, accounts, properties, and personal effects, all linked to him. His will, the trusts, the inheritance, everything was split with care. But the emotional inheritance, that cannot be divided so neatly. The room was silent. We understood that we were inheriting not just material possessions, but the weight of decades of secrets. My grandfather's shadow stretched long and heavy across all our lives. We left the house that evening with the journal and letters. Each of us felt the gravity. The children, now more aware, clung to Margaret's guidance, trying to reconcile love and betrayal. My mother and I were exhausted, burdened by revelation, yet grateful for understanding. And as the car pulled away, the house on Cedar Street seemed to loom larger, not as a home, but as a monument to choices, love, and deception.
Cedar Street was quiet, deceptively calm, but inside, emotions churned violently. Today was the day of reckoning. The hidden life of a man we had called grandfather would finally be revealed in full. Margaret opened the door without hesitation, her eyes sharp and calculating. "This is not a game," she said. "You are about to see everything. Letters, journals, hidden accounts, every secret he carried. Prepare yourselves." My mother's hands trembled slightly as we stepped inside. The photographs lining the walls were a silent indictment, a reminder of moments stolen, lives divided. The children followed closely, apprehensive but curious. Margaret handed my mother the journal. "Every secret is in here. His thoughts, confessions, fears, every choice he made is recorded. Understand it, and understand the consequences of knowing." The handwriting was meticulous, filled with reflections of love, guilt, and calculation. The children's eyes scanned pages as we read together. Each entry revealed a father who loved but manipulated, who protected yet deceived, who balanced affection and betrayal with skill honed over decades. January 12, 1978. The burden of deception grows. Both families deserve my care. How can I satisfy either fully? Each day I divide my heart further. March 3, 1980. Margaret asks me to choose. I promise her departure. Yet I know I cannot abandon either. Survival demands secrecy. Love demands compromise. Margaret's voice broke the silence. He thought he could keep the lives separate. He could not. But he tried, calculating every action to minimize harm. The children were silent, absorbing a reality far more complex than they could imagine. Their father was no villain, yet no hero either. He was human, flawed, capable of love and betrayal simultaneously. November 18, 1985. I fear the day of collision, both families discovering the other. Chaos, heartbreak, anger. But secrecy is my shield. My legacy is divided. My soul is fractured. The journal painted a portrait of a man both strategic and vulnerable, controlled yet fearful, devoted yet deceptive. Every entry revealed the careful orchestration of a life split in two, a life meant to shield yet inevitably wound. Margaret added, her voice calm but cold. "The photograph, the letters, the meeting today, they were all planned by your grandmother. She knew this moment would arrive. She designed it to expose truths without causing irreparable damage, to allow understanding without destroying innocence." We realized the full scope. My grandfather's shadow was not just the past. It was the inheritance of truth, betrayal, and love divided. Material wealth, property, trusts, accounts, these could be split. Emotional truths, however, were indivisible and haunting. As we left Cedar Street, the sun casting long shadows, we understood. The revelation was not the end. It was the beginning of a new understanding of family, loyalty, and identity. The bridge between the children, the legacy of our grandfather, and the consequences of his choices had been crossed. We were now custodians of the truth, and that truth was heavier than any inheritance.
The morning light spilled softly across Cedar Street, golden and forgiving, as if the world itself wanted to soothe the wounds of decades of secrets. Today was not about confrontation or discovery. It was about understanding, acceptance, and beginning to weave together the fragments of a family long divided. Margaret greeted us at the door, her expression unreadable but warmer than before. "This is the day you begin to merge lives," she said softly. "But remember, it is delicate. Respect and patience will guide you better than haste." We nodded. There was a gravity in the air, yet a sense of hope that hadn't existed before. Today, the children, those we had met over the past weeks, were ready for deeper connection, and we were ready, cautiously, to step into the lives that had once been strangers. The living room was filled with photographs, each frame a frozen memory. We began by pointing out familiar faces, recounting small stories, and sharing laughter. It was awkward at first, timid smiles, cautious glances, but slowly the ice began to melt. The boy laughed at a story of our grandfather's clumsy attempt at fishing, while the girl's eyes sparkled as she heard anecdotes about birthday cakes gone wrong. These small moments, mundane in isolation, were monumental in bridging years of separation. Margaret watched quietly, letting the children and us navigate the interaction. Then she spoke, her voice calm but firm. Your grandmother's wish was always for connection, not estrangement. She wanted the truth to unite, not destroy. Today you honor that vision. My mother held the younger boy's hand gently. You are part of our family, not just by blood, but by love. We are here now, and we want to be a part of your lives. The boy hesitated, but slowly nodded. I want that too, he said quietly, his voice small but earnest. The older girl, more cautious, asked, And you? Will you really accept us? I met her gaze and nodded firmly. Yes, we can't change the past, but we can shape the future together. The children smiled tentatively. It was a fragile beginning, but it was something real, something worth protecting. Margaret then guided us to the journals, letters, and documents that had revealed our grandfather's life. The material inheritance is less important than the emotional inheritance, but both must be acknowledged. He split his life, but you now have the chance to unify it in understanding and memory. We spent hours going through every detail, every note, every memory. Each revelation was met with discussion, questions, and occasional laughter. My mother read entries aloud. The children asked questions, and slowly walls were coming down. Your grandfather loved you all, she said, voice shaking with emotion. In his flawed way, he tried to give everything he could to all of us. We were never meant to know the full pain of his choices until now, but we can choose how to honor it today. As evening approached, the children invited us to play outside. We kicked the ball, skipped rope, and shared ice cream in the backyard, the same place where the first tentative interactions had taken place. It was surreal. After weeks of tension, pain, and revelation, the simple act of shared play was profoundly healing. Margaret watched from a distance. This is the start. The first day of understanding, the first day of unity. Time will tell what bonds truly endure, but today is the proof that they can. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across Cedar Street. For the first time, the house did not feel like a monument to deception. It felt like a home, where love, patience, and understanding could finally exist without the weight of secrecy. We left that evening with a sense of cautious hope, knowing that the journey ahead would still be complex, but believing that love, shared, acknowledged, and nurtured, would guide the family forward. The morning on Cedar Street carried tension, like the calm before a storm. We were not just visiting a house. We were confronting a legacy carved out by secrets, deception, and divided lives. Today would decide if trust could be rebuilt, if reconciliation was possible, and if the shadow of a man who had split his family could finally give way to light. Margaret opened the door, her eyes sharp, assessing our readiness. Be prepared, she said. The children are aware, but their emotions are fragile. Step carefully. Inside, the photographs seemed accusatory. Each frame reflected decades of omission, choices made behind closed doors, and lives shaped without full knowledge. But there was no turning back. Today, the truth would not only be acknowledged, it would be integrated. The children appeared, tentative but observant.
The boy watched us with curiosity, the girl with a guarded skepticism. I took a deep breath. "We are here," I said, "not to take over, not to replace anyone, but to be part of this family, finally, all of us together." The boy asked cautiously, "All of us? That's a lot. Dad had a lot going on. Can it really work?" My mother nodded. "It can. We cannot change the past, but we can choose how we move forward, together." The girl's eyes narrowed. "And if it doesn't work? If we can't trust each other?" Margaret interjected, gently but firmly. "Trust grows slowly. It is earned, not demanded. Today is the first step. Do not underestimate it." We began by sharing stories, anecdotes, and small moments of humor. The boy laughed at tales of our grandfather's clumsy attempts at home repairs, while the girl softened as she listened to stories of birthday cakes gone awry. Each moment, small in isolation, was monumental in bridging decades of separation. Then Margaret brought out the journals and letters. "These are the keys to understanding your father," she said. "He lived 2 lives. Now you must navigate both truths. The emotional weight is heavier than the physical inheritance." The children listened as we read entries aloud. The complexity of our grandfather's life became clear. Love divided, choices flawed, but intention present. The children asked questions, sometimes confrontational, sometimes gentle. We answered honestly, acknowledging pain, mistakes, and the weight of secrecy. As the afternoon progressed, we moved outside. The boy suggested a ball game. The girl reluctantly joined in, setting aside her initial skepticism. Laughter echoed across the backyard, a sound previously unheard in these divided lives. Margaret observed silently. "This is not perfection," she said quietly. "This is the beginning of reconciliation. Bonds will strengthen, weaken, and test you, but the first step has been taken." By evening, the children were more comfortable, interacting naturally, sharing stories, and even teasing us with laughter. The house, once a monument to hidden lives, now breathed with warmth and tentative acceptance. As we drove away from Cedar Street, the sun set in fiery hues, painting the sky with promise. The legacy of our grandfather, long a shadow over our lives, was now understood. The family, once fractured by secrets, was beginning to knit together, cautiously, with patience, respect, and love. The road ahead would still be challenging, filled with moments of doubt and reconciliation, but today had proven that even the most fractured family could find a way to heal, connect, and honor the past while stepping into a shared future. The shadow of deception had finally begun to lift, leaving behind a legacy not just of secrets, but of resilience, understanding, and the power of family.